Welcome to Your Creative Midlife. I'm Betsy Bush. Are you ready to take up something new? A paintbrush, an instrument, a camera? Looking to explore the creative side of life, but not sure how to start or what to expect? My guests were where you are right now, and they're here to share their experience and give great advice. My guest is Stella Fosse. She left a biotech career in her 60s and started writing. She's written 2 novels and has published essays on creativity and romance. We talked about her 2 books on writing to inspire the creativity of older women. Just to give you an idea of Stella's creative imagination, her novel, Vampires of a Certain Age, celebrates the love life of a 500-year-old woman. Stella, I am so glad to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I have to say, I have never seen anyone occupy the space that you are occupying now. I mean, you talk about you're now in your 70s. You talk
Mhm.
about leaving your scientific career in your 60s, and you started writing, and I feel like you had something to write about at the time. Do you want to tell us about that?
I had always wanted to write whatever I felt like, and in my career, I wrote submissions to the Food and Drug Administration on behalf of companies that had new products. The longest one I ever wrote was my height. It was 32 volumes. So I was really glad when I was able to switch into writing my own stuff. And a friend of mine, Lynx Cannon, around the time that I was retiring, started a reading series at a local bookstore. We were in the East Bay in the Oakland, Berkeley area. And it was called Dirty Old Women. And she invited her friends to write sexy stories and come read them in front of a live audience. And I took that as a challenge. I'd never done anything like that. And I thought, well, if I want to write my own stuff, why not start here?
It sounds like fun, and I can just imagine the hoots of laughter and the cheers that probably took place with a bunch of friends writing stories that they probably never imagined they would be writing themselves, or that their friends would be writing.
And we had a full house every time. We had people, we had men, women, younger, older, and some of our most enthusiastic fans were women in their late 30s who'd gotten the false message that the romantic side or sexual side of life stopped at 40 for women.
Holy
And
cow!
they were really grateful to hear stories that showed that that wasn't the case.
Why do you think? Why do you think that is?
Why do I think there's such prejudice
Yeah,
against
I,
women?
I, I guess, good heavens, at 40, I feel like, a lot of us are just starting, um, right? And it seems to be a part of, again, a space that has been left empty, or it's just a blank wall for maybe a lot of people. The
Hmm.
idea of, I don't know, the idea of women. Well, you hear this about movie stars, right? That at age 40,
Sure.
you're no longer considered, the romantic
Mhm.
lead. Suddenly you're someone's mother, right? Or, older sister or aunt or something.
Yeah, and I think that kind of prejudice kind of feeds on itself. When Gina Davis, who was of course, a major star, turned 40,
Hmm.
she had heard from some of her friends who are a little older that their careers had dried up and blown away on their 40th birthday. And she was pretty sure because of the size and scope of her career that she'd be immune to that. But sure enough, the phone call stopped. She'd been making a movie every year.
Hmm.
And she made altogether in her 40s, that entire decade, she made one movie.
Wow.
And that's why she started the Gina Davis Institute. and started promoting the idea of the importance of having diverse voices and diverse representations in movies. And she went way beyond older women, although that's certainly a focus of that institute, but she also promotes lots of different kinds of diversity. And she's expanded into looking at why it's important to show active female characters in cartoons.
Hmm.
So she's looking at a lot of different issues, but her initial impetus was that very real prejudice against women over even over 40, much less over 50 or 60.
How did you start writing, and what was your first experience in putting published work out there? Was it scary for you? Did you approach it with trepidation? I mean, if you're writing something fiction or even an essay, it's very different, I would imagine, from the scientific writing you had been doing.
It is really different. And yet we just made sort of a play space at Dirty Old Women. And I started thinking about the idea of publishing a book that would showcase the vivid and erotic writing of older women. And I went to a creative retreat hosted by my friend Susan Ito, who has actually recently published a beautiful memoir that's getting a lot of critical attention. But she hosted every year a retreat that was a writer and artist retreat, and it was really fun because the writers would do art and the artists would write. And it's a great way to circumvent your inner critic by doing things that you don't ordinarily do. But at any rate, the point is, I sat next to, I sat down next to a woman, and I was saying to her, I'm in this group. We've been writing. We have this group called Eldoratica. We get together and write and share our stories. And I've been thinking about how great it would be to publish a book about that, about how and why to write erotica and publish it as an older woman. And she said to me, I work at North Atlantic Books and we'd love to publish a book like that,
Wow.
which is a story you never hear about people getting a publishing deal in such a sort of friendly, informal way. But that's what happened with my first book, Aphrodite's Pen, The Power of Writing Erotica After Midlife. So no,
And
it wasn't scary. It was,
oh, that's
it
great.
was quite fresh.
And you started. I'd like to point to maybe community resources for people to turn to who are starting to explore, starting that creative exploration. Did you have community? Well, you had the book group, you had your Dirty
Mhm.
Old Women group. Were there other resources you took advantage of? A writers group, you're talking about a workshop now. Do you think how a lot of people get started, or maybe you'd recommend they get started that way?
Um, I think a couple things. Are you talking about books or about other kinds of resources?
Well, I guess getting
Classrooms?
started with the writing process. I mean, here in Westchester, Sarah Lawrence College has a writers institute for uh, anyone. You don't have to be a matriculated student. But we also have Hudson Valley Writers Center, for people who are working
Right.
on different
Okay.
types of writing.
Yes.
Did anything like that work for you?
I didn't have that kind of support right away, but when I later moved to North Carolina and got involved with the North Carolina Writers Network, which is a statewide organization. I eventually led a subset of that group that covered 7 counties. And then I've just moved to Oregon, and here in Oregon, we have the Willamette Writers, which I've just joined. I think a lot of locations have those kinds of supports for writers. And in addition to that, there's also OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute,
Mhm.
which has lots of different kinds of creative classes, including writing classes. And they have their organization has subgroups all over the country. So there are lots of different kinds of supports for writers in their communities. In addition to that, a lot of senior centers um, have writing classes.
Mhm.
So yes, there's a lot around. There also are Zoom classes. I took courses, I did when I was in the Bay Area, take courses with Andy Couturier. His book, Writing Open the Mind, is terrific for folks who are having trouble with their inner critic and just playful ways to circumvent that. And Andy has courses online as well.
Oh,
So
these are all great ideas, and I'll be sure to put links to those in the show notes because
great.
I'm sure a lot of listeners would be interested in following those up. Um,
Mhm.
I I loved your the 500-year-old vampire character who is this a reoccurring character in a romance novel? Is that is that where she appears, or was that a one-off? And tell us about that and how that did your science career um, inspire this idea about the vampire. Well, I don't want to spoil too much, but I guess it's not spoiling to say that the vampire it heads up a blood bank. So she is
That's right.
ethically sourcing.
Ethically sourced blood. Yes.
I just love that idea. How did you come up with that idea? I love that.
Well, when I was in biotech, I did a lot of work in biologics, including working with blood banks. I worked on blood screening assays, so I was familiar with the fact that a good percentage of blood that's donated ends up being rejected, either because it tests positive for an illness, because blood is, of course, tested extensively before it's distributed to customers, or in some cases, blood ages out, it expires.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my sort of fantasy world that I created for this novel, the vampires don't care. They don't get human diseases, so they're fine with, blood that has hepatitis or any other kind of disease
Who knew
positive
this
test.
about
And,
vampires?
and
I'm
they're
glad
not that
you told
fussy
you
about
know that's
expired blood
right.
either.
Okay.
So yes, my vampire, in addition to it being a love story about this vampire, she also heads up a blood bank outside Chicago and provides ethically sourced blood to Midwestern vampires.
Are there a lot of those vampires in the Midwest? Asking
Apparently,
for a
yeah,
friend, right?
at least in my imagination, it's quite a popular place, that blood bank.
You've written a book called Write and Sell, a Well-Seasoned Romance. And
Hmm.
this book literally takes you through all the steps of writing a romance novel. And I'm not sure, well, I'm not a part of the community that reads romance novels, but apparently it's a huge field. The books are maybe formulaic, but they still. I mean, how many times have we read Pride and Prejudice and we still wonder if Mr. Darcy's going to come through in the end, right? It's it's an age-old sort of thing that is always new. And I'm wondering how you discovered the romance world.
Ah,
And
yeah. Well, when I wrote my first novel, so when I was a kid, I promised myself I would publish my first novel by the time I was 25, and I ended up being 43 years late because my first novel published when I was 68, and
wow.
that was called Brilliant Charming Bastard, and that book is about three women scientists who discover that they are dating the same lying dilettante and he's stealing their ideas for his invention. So they join forces and take some rather intelligent revenge. So I thought that I had written a romance, but it wasn't. It wasn't anywhere near being a romance. So I learned about, after that experience, I learned about how to construct a romance novel. And it's interesting, this idea that this very common idea that romance novels are formulaic. It is very interesting to me. Like if you think about Shakespeare's sonnets, okay, they are so structured. They are, talk about if you wanted to use the word formulaic, you could certainly use that about a sonnet, but nobody does. And I think it's interesting that that word gets applied to this genre of romance that's primarily read by women. I just think that's kind of interesting. But anyway,
Hmm.
so I decided that
Fair
I would
point.
write something that fit the romance category. And that was the genesis of the vampire book, Vampires of a Certain Age, which is structured according to how you build a romance novel. And um, and then I thought, you know, there just aren't enough romance novels with older characters to meet the demand because it turns out that most people who read romance novels are women over 40. And most of the characters in romance novels tend to be in their 20s. So that's when I thought I could put together all this information that I have now about writing and editing and publishing and marketing a romance novel and put that out there as a guide so that there would be more romance novels with characters of a certain age. So that was the genesis of it. I also had a chance to teach a course on that subject and bring all that information together. So that was great because I got to practice these ideas before I put the book together. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Well,
It was it was
I have
really
to
fun.
say, yeah, I have to say, I read it and I'm like, I might be able to do this, you know? I mean,
You
it was
could, of
really
course you could.
interesting as a kind of a step-by-step guide, you know. They have this
Mhm.
meeting where they're convinced they hate each other and then something happens and then, you know, there obviously is a change of heart, but then there are roadblocks in the way. Again, well, it I I think maybe all romance novels started with Pride and Prejudice, would you say? With all
Oh, I
the
don't I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I mean, yeah, there romance novels have a long history and they've over time they've been political at different times. I mean, the very fact that the romance novel exists is a testament to its economic power because there was a time in the early years of the 1900s when publishers were actively discouraged from publishing these books, and yet they were such money makers that the genre just kept on going. And the reason they were discouraged is that they do focus on women's desire, women's sensuality and sexuality. And that's been oddly enough controversial at certain times in history. So, yeah,
yeah.
the whole situation. I think the history of the romance novel is fascinating.
What do you think will be accomplished if we have more women writing about this aspect of their lives that has remained largely hidden for a long
Right.
time?
Um, I mentioned earlier about the Gina Davis Institute. They have a saying there: "If she can see it, she can be it."
Mm.
And I think that that motto really speaks to the importance of our stories, and not just in movies, but also in literature. When we put our stories out there about our vibrant lives as they actually are, that are really so different from the stereotype of older women, we let other women know what's possible. We let women coming into our age group know what's possible, and that the stereotypes are really off the mark and don't pertain to the way we actually live our lives. So I do think that writing vivid stories in our post 60 years, we're really doing each other a big favor. We're pushing back on internalized ageism when we write, we're pushing back on ageism in society when we share our stories. And that's really important to our health and well-being.
You're almost you. Well, let's see. You're writing a new book. It's a
Mm-hmm.
collection of essays, which I had the pleasure of being a first reader or
Yes, a
yeah,
beta
and
reader.
which I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah.
Tell me what that is about and what you're hoping to get out in the world, and what do you hope people will take from, especially other women will take from the book of essays that's coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a really fun project. I've been blogging for almost 10 years. And as I look back on what I've been writing, on the essays I've been writing, they tend to cluster into certain themes. There are essays about health, um, really of interest to me given my professional background, as well as the fact that, I'm living in a body that's now 71 years old. Um, I've written quite a bit about finance. I have an MBA from Columbia, and I was in finance for a couple of years
Oh,
before
I
my
didn't know
kids were
that.
born.
Hmm.
And so I'm really interested personally and because of that background in what finances are like for women in our older years. And I've written about beauty. I've written about housing. There are just certain things that keep cropping up in my essays, and creativity, of course. So I went to a workshop run by a writer named Patricia Gopo, and she was talking about ways to organize your work, and one of those ways was to look at themes. So I started pulling together sort of my greatest hits, the essays that seem to engage readers the most, and group them into those themes. And I also decided to write profiles on each theme. There's a profile about an older woman who's really showing us the possibilities of later life. So for the section on power later in life, I have a profile of Ashton Applewhite, for example. So this has been just a really fun project, and I'm excited to see it come to a conclusion. And I really appreciate your comments and the comments from the other early readers, and of course the comments from the folks who've read the essays individually on my blog over the years.
You know, we're talking about creativity, and it seems to me like what you've been able to accomplish online. I mean, you have the free uh, world
Mm-hmm.
of posting online and writing online and creating a community that feeds, that supports itself and is out there just supporting each other and cheering each other on.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself is hugely creative. I mean, you've created this persona of cheering on older women and presenting a whole other view of what life post 60 could look like that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of
Mm-hmm.
us need to see.
Well, thank you for that. We are living in a time when there are so many opportunities for us to connect with each other and to make our voices heard. When I was about to retire and I was thinking about becoming an author, becoming a published author, I read an article in the New York Times book review section by a romance author who was then in her 50s. And she was encouraging her sister romance writers to write characters in their 20s. She said, if you want to get published, that's what you need to do. And that kind of bias in the traditional publishing industry has kind of been blown away because there are so many more opportunities to get the word out on social media, to publish through, um, independent publishers, to self-publish. We're living in a time when there's a lot of freedom and a lot of opportunity for varied voices, which is I'm really grateful for.
It's through the magic of the internet that I've got to know you and that I've been reading your work, and I'm it's your again, just the memes that you post, if I can put it that way, just um, they cheer me every day, and again, it's supporting each other and cheering each other on. And I encourage anyone who thinks she might be a budding romance writer over 50 or over 60, take a look at Stella's book, because she really does provide a fascinating step by step to how you might be able to write your own romance for the type of character that you would like to see, that maybe reflects who you are right now, rather than who you might have been 40 years ago, if I can put it that way, 40 or more years ago. Because we're not dead yet, right? What did Maggie Kuhn say? Maggie Kuhn, who was the founder of the Gray Panthers, what did she say? She had a famous motto.
Learning in sex until rigor mortis.
There you go. I'm all for
That's it. That's it.
That's great.
Oh,
Stella
thank you.
Fosse, thank you so much. This has been incredible. What a great conversation. And I'll post all the links to your books online, and we are going to have the slides of your book cover art edited into the conversation, so on YouTube, so everyone will be able to see those beautiful covers. Thank you so much, Stella, and all the best, and hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
I hope so. And thank you so much for the conversation. I've loved it.
Great. This has been fun. Thanks again. Thanks for tuning in. You can see episodes on our website, yourcreativemidlife.com, and read more about me and my guests. And if you like us, please subscribe or follow, and give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review. I'm Betsy Bush. Thanks for being here.